You saw yesterday how the European Court of Human Rights has ruled that Caster Semenya had been discriminated against by the body now known as World Athletics when they said that she had to take medication to lower her levels of testosterone to run in women's events. But World Athletics say they won't change their rules, which means at the moment Caster still can't run in these events. The case first went to the Court for Arbitration for Sport in Switzerland. When Caster lost there, she went to appeal through the Swiss legal system. They ruled against her. It was that ruling that was overturned by the European Courts of Human Rights when they ruled in her favour yesterday. The problem with that, of course, lawyers being lawyers, is that yesterday's ruling is not necessarily binding on World Athletics. Well, let's speak to a nice lawyer now. Benedict Phiri is a founder and managing director of IusPrudentia Specialist Counsel and, in fact, represented Caster Semenya at the beginning of all of this. Benedict, good afternoon to you. I mean, you know Caster, you represented her. A very, very big day for her yesterday and for her team.
Yeah, good afternoon, Stephen. I think it is a very big day. You know, when I initially met Caster and initially represented her, it was 2009. She was a 19-year-old. And to eventually get justice in the form of recognition that her human rights were violated and she was discriminated against with, you know, the way the World Athletics, or IAAF at the time, dealt with the issue of the DSD regulations that prevented her from running at some point in time.
So, I mean, you suggested justice and recognition. She still can't run. It seems strange to me that, you know, we're used to a situation where you win a case, and that means you can now do what you wanted to do in the first place, or whoever stopped you from doing it was wrong. The European Court of Human Rights has ruled in her favour, and yet World Athletics says it won't change its rules.
Yeah, you know, they don't have to change the rules at this particular point in time, because obviously what was being challenged was the Swiss court's ability to give effect to the European Human Rights Convention, and it not necessarily a frontal challenge on World Athletics DSD regulations. But what the court actually said yesterday will have lasting ramifications, and it will only be a matter of time before those regulations change, because essentially what the court did is it infused the question of human rights into the way that bodies such as CAS or the IAAF or any other body that gets, you know, the disputes get litigated at the CAS, has to think about how they give effect to their rules and regulations. So at this particular juncture, the European Court said there's no justification for treating Caster or any other person with a similar condition to her in the manner that it has been done. And in fact, the treatment was a gross violation of her human rights, which I think is correct, because the question then is who challenges it next, because it clearly won't survive scrutiny if there is a challenge and it makes its way again to the European Court for Human Rights.
So is there any way at this stage to force World Athletics to change its rules, apart from, I don't know, every athlete in the world refusing to accept their legitimacy? I mean, is there any way to actually force this legally?
Well, there needs to be unfortunately, the challenge would have to come again in much the way that Caster has done it. So it would need to be somebody refusing, World Athletics either banning or, you know, taking some other drastic measure in retaliation to that, an arbitration at the Court for Arbitration for Sports in Switzerland. And I think at that point in time, the Court for Arbitration for Sports would have to take strong heed of what came out of the European Court yesterday, and I think we might get a different outcome at that particular point in time.
We're used to our judgments being written in English. Sometimes it makes sense. And there are little bits of Latin that you have to sort of look up. This was written in French, as I understand it, so translating that, you probably need a sworn translator to actually do that. Is there anything in the judgment that stands out for you? I mean, it's quite an interesting finding, and we mustn't forget, I think it was 4-3, wasn't it?
Yes, 4-3, so it was a very tight judgment. Fortunately, I did study French, so I could make my way somewhat through it. But, you know, I found the casting of the importance of international athletes to say, you know, when you participate in international athletics or international soccer or whatever the case may be, you have no choice but to bring your dispute, if you have a dispute against FIFA or your club or federation, to the Court for Arbitration for Sport. And if that court or that tribunal cannot give effect to human rights, then the review tribunal, which in this case was the Swiss court, has to ensure that human rights actually permeate, because that is what is required from a European perspective. I thought that was really an important pointer for any international athlete, because sometimes it seems like a take it or leave it in some kind of way. But if there are issues that directly implicate human rights, I think there will be some relief for international athletes going forward. I thought that was really a masterstroke.
From what's happened now with Caster, and you pointed to how the regulations may only change if another athlete with almost the same set of facts comes forward. So am I right to think that there's nothing to stop World Athletics treating a person like Caster in exactly the same way after all of this?
It would be a shame, Stephen, but certainly at this point in time, there would be nothing to stop them. And, they haven't conducted themselves completely above board in this process. There was a challenge to these regulations by an Indian athlete, Duchi Chand, which then led to the regulations being suspended, and on which basis then Caster resumed her competition without adhering to the regulations. Then they changed the regulations to effectively target Caster. She brought the challenge to the CAS, and in between the challenge, they changed the regulations again. So I'm not particularly confident that we might not get similar conduct from them, but certainly it would be a shame for them to continue in this particular way.
It seems to me that this is a group of people far away, very few of whom are from our continent, who are sucking their thumbs and making up the rules as they go along. In this case, they made the rules specifically to keep her out.
Absolutely. And I think, the second set of rules, or the ones that are actually in play, which deal with the chromosome, the X chromosome, it was very clear that, there's a certain narrow band of athletes that are being targeted in that particular respect. And the European Court found that there actually is no scientific evidence to show that there would be an unfair advantage conferred on an athlete as a result of having a different chromosome that they would have, right, or a disorder of sexual difference. So, it does seem a bit arbitrary, and certainly we have some judicial pronouncement on a European continental level that, the way it's been gone about has been arbitrary, and hopefully they can pay heed to that, because a challenge will come at some point or another.
Well, there's so many conversations around issues that are like this. Some of them relate directly, some don't, to this issue. You said earlier that you first met Caster when she was 19. It's a long time ago. And this has really marked her entire career. She has some very important medals, some of them representing our country. But can one imagine what her career would have been like without all of this nonsense?
I think you can imagine, Stephen. When I first met her, she'd just won her gold medal in Berlin. There was an uproar, and myself and Greg Knott, who's currently her lawyer, wrote to the Minister of Sport, Makenkesi Stofile, and offered our services. Fortunately, by the time we'd sort of gone through what we needed to go through, she had an ability to win another World Championship gold medal and an Olympic title. And obviously it's all gone a little bit differently given what has happened, but certainly she's an exceptional talent. She's a world champion, rightfully so, and I'm not surprised that she's taken the fight right to the highest levels given what I know about her.
Benedict Phiri, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate it. The founder and managing director of IusPrudentia Specialist Counsel, one of the lawyers who've given their help to Caster Semenya in what's been a very, very difficult fight for her. And still, of course, as things